Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is Michael G. Williams, the award-winning author of the Withrow Chronicles about suburban vampire Withrow Surratt. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. Earlier this summer, Falstaff Books released Nobody Gets Out Alive, the fifth and final book in the Withrow Chronicles. What was the hardest part about bringing Withrow's saga to a close?
Well, partly letting go and finishing the story and accepting that my next project would not be Withrow. And also partly figuring out how do I pay off the story that I've built up in a way that is going to be satisfying to readers and answers questions without trying to answer every question, because I feel like too many writers, if they're finishing a series, answer every question and leave absolutely nothing to the imagination. And readers want to have some questions that are unanswered. They want to have some stuff left to think about at the end, to wonder about. So much of what we're trying to do is to create wonder, to create curiosity in people, to foster and encourage that curiosity in them. And I feel like if I tried to answer every question, I would have been turning readers off.
Okay, cool. Cool. From the hints you've let drop, however, it appears you may be writing additional short stories and novellas in Withrow's world. Is this true, or were you just teasing?
I'm going to answer your either-or question with yes. I said that on a lark because I kind of wanted to leave open the possibility. And then as soon as I said it, I started having ideas.
Oh, cool.
And so there are going to be at least 3 novellas in the world of the Withrow Chronicles that are going to be some time from now. I have some other stuff under contract that I need to make sure that I pay attention to, and other ideas I want to pursue, but I'm also by no means done with the Withrow Chronicles. One of the things that my publisher and I have talked about is that idea that novellas are a place where authors can create their own extended universe.
Right.
You can address stories, address characters, things like that you don't really have time for in the course of the regular novels. And there are a lot of characters in the Withrow Chronicles I want to spend more time with that I just didn't have time to squeeze into the books.
And there's backstory, too, that, how did Withrow wind up in that particular suburban development when the zombie apocalypse happened?
Exactly. I want to get to talk about the book people. I want to get to talk about the techno-pagans. I want to get to talk more about what Roderick's life is like outside of Withrow's view. Things like that.
Probably very scary.
It is.
Going from Withrow to your new project, you recently published the first in a new series set in a flying city of the far future that bears a distinct resemblance to San Francisco. What prompted you to go in that direction?
Partly I love San Francisco. And the project that I have coming out is an urban fantasy series set there.
Oh, cool.
But there are a lot of things that tied into that. I wanted to write some science fiction because I had written so much horror. I wanted to write a detective story because I love detective stories and have since I was a child. Nancy Drew was my role model as a child in a major way. She had everything I wanted in life. She had an absentee father and a car of her own and a couple of friends to go get in trouble with her. I don't know any kid that needs more than that.
Yeah.
And I also, I just deeply love San Francisco, and I wanted to make sure that San Francisco was preserved in the future in some way. And so I made sure that parts of that city reflected
in the city called Autumn, right?
Yes.
And the name of the book is The Fall of Autumn, so I'm not giving anything away there.
A Fall in Autumn.
A Fall in Autumn. Better yet. Okay. I love San Francisco, too, and the city always calls to mind to me one of my very favorite detective stories, which is set in San Francisco, The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. Was Hammett one of your muses for the project, and were there any others?
Oh, absolutely. Although, maybe a little less. I love The Maltese Falcon as a book and as a film, but I really love the book. And the book is, in many ways, much grittier than the movie in a way that is really enjoyable. I also really love Hammett's other work, and I love The Thin Man. That's one of my favorite novels of all time. And so I wanted to have that sort of flirty, funny character as a detective, the way that they are in that. And but then there's also Philip Marlowe in a big way. I was saying to somebody earlier that when I first envisioned Valerius's office, I pictured Philip Marlowe's office, from any of the countless
Yes.
adaptations.
Yes.
That idea of sort of a dusty office that has a desk and a couch, and you know he sleeps on the couch too. And just that sort of idea, I just really love. And Ross MacDonald, I'd been reading a lot of Ross MacDonald before I wrote this, and really wanted to capture some of that. But I also really wanted to write a Rockford Files in the future.
So the same humor that was in the Withrow Chronicles may float through, because
Absolutely.
you know, the description for a fall in autumn, it sounded like this is his last case. He's really depressed. He's really ground down, and I'm going, oh, this is going to be gritty, and it's going to be San Francisco, and it's. But where's the humor? Is it going to be? I love humor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important to me. Now, you love mysteries, obviously. You've just given the catalog of the big ones. But you also really do love science fiction and fantasy. And it's important to you on many levels, at least from what I've read. Why? What makes it so important to your reading and writing life?
Science fiction and fantasy are genres where a lot of us can find a world that accepts us. Even if we don't necessarily live in a world that accepts us at the time we find those genres. You know, I grew up a gay kid in a very small place in a very remote part of Appalachia, in a place where I was surrounded by hostile forces, and those hostile forces were very open, and they thought that displaying that hostility was a form of caring.
Oh, gee.
And so I have a really good therapist. It's okay.
Oh, good.
I say that like it's a joke, but it's true. It's important. But that sort of science fiction and fantasy were the places where I could find people who looked like me, who thought like I did, who talked the way that I talked, and who lived in a world that I wanted our world to be more like. You know, these were stories explicitly about people who are in some really important, significant way different. Different in a way that they'll never change and don't necessarily want to change, don't feel compelled to change, even as the world tells them they should.
Yeah.
And so those are places, those are the kinds of stories where I could be very validated, and those are the kinds of stories that people still need to be validated by. We all need to be able to open a book. You know, one of the things they said on a panel at a con one year was, everybody who reaches for a book wants that book to reach back. You know, and that's the way that you can find a world that is accepting of you and even inviting to you.
Yes, definitely. You're also an avid gamer and a proud gamer with a Y. You developed setting and background material for the 20th anniversary edition of Wraith the Oblivion and are developing a Withrow Chronicles tabletop RPG. Recently, well, for several years, unfortunately, gaming culture has suffered a lot from the cruelty and prejudice of a small claque of players. Is there any way to hardwire positive values such as respect, diversity, inclusiveness into the games themselves?
To answer your question, to hardwire it, we have to design games so that they reward cooperation and they not necessarily punish, but they put curbs on competition. We have to bring people to the table and tell them the game we're going to play is going to be about helping each other, about supporting each other. We may not all have characters with the same goals. Our characters might even be rivals. But every player at the table needs to be coming together to create a story together. And to recognize that this is a shared experience that we're creating as a community. Whether it's of 2 or 3 people at a table or it's 50 people in a LARP, whatever the situation is, the game has to mechanically reward the player's effort to cooperate and collaborate. I think that a lot of popular culture tells us a lot of crisis situations boil down to Mad Max, you know. And every game ultimately is about a crisis situation, whether it's the dragon that's kidnapped the princess or it's, you know, the vampire prince has been offed and now everybody is trying to determine who's going to be the next vampire in charge. Every game story is almost always about a crisis. And so much popular culture has told us that in a crisis, all the rules are off and it's every person for themselves. And in the real world, studies have shown us that that is not the case. And that in crises, in reality, people tend to come together. that communities tend to draw together and pool their resources and support each other much more than they ever did before the crisis. And this can be observed over and over and over again, and everything from a hurricane to an earthquake to you name it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we have to start telling stories that feature that part of the real human experience, to start building that into our popular understanding of what a crisis requires of us. I think we also, outside of the page of the game and outside of the table, we have to speak out a lot about the values that we want to see reflected in the games that we're playing and the games that we're creating and the books that we're writing and the books that we're reading. That tiny minority is very loud, and because they're so loud, they're very good at convincing other people that they represent a bigger slice of the pie than they really are. And we have to get better at getting loud about opposing them.
Yes, I agree. We're getting up on the end of the interview, and we've got 2 questions we always ask. Mm-hmm. What are you working on now?
So, right now I'm working on a sequel to A Fallen Autumn, and I'm also working on a new urban fantasy series, also set in San Francisco. That one is a time travel series about the real historical personage of Emperor Norton, and 2 modern-day witches who live in the Tenderloin who summon Emperor Norton back from the dead in order to help them fight a demon of greed who is running a real estate scam in gentrified San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Can't wait, because Emperor Norton is such a character.
Oh, he really is.
Yes, he is.
So that series is called Servant Sovereign. It's set in the Shadow Council Archives world of Falstaff Books, and the first one is called Through the Doors of Oblivion.
Okay, cool. And finally, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think to go back to the question about how do we improve the situation with gaming culture. Let's take a lesson from Pride and from the history of Pride. This year is the 50th anniversary of Pride. The 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, which is also sometimes referred to as the Stonewall Riots. And when I say that we have to be loud and we have to make sure that people know what we want in the world, it's part of our job to make the world that we will live in tomorrow. In the same sense that every writer, when they describe a world in a book, they are to some degree, when they write today, saying how they want the real world of tomorrow to look, how they think it should look. No matter what they say, every word they choose to put on the page, they're trying to shape the future. And we as players and as game creators and everything have to decide what world we want to live in, and remember that that Pride was a riot, and that people were loud, and that if they were angry about the way that they were treated, they had to do something to push back a little bit, to push back on the forces that were keeping them oppressed against their will, and taking advantage of the fact that they had a bigger megaphone. And I think that as gamers and as readers and as writers, we have to do exactly the same thing. We have to push back against those forces, and we have to be very focused, and we have to be persistent. We have to be very energetic and never turn down an opportunity to speak against them.
Yes. I think that's a great closer. Thank you, Michael.
Hey, thank you.
And thank you for Buzzy Magazine.